Yeah, there are actually two questions already there. Michael, I don't know if you can read them.
Yeah, let me check them. So, how do you lose? How does one lose his Zen Master title? That's awesome. I don't know. I guess maybe you still have it. Maybe it's like it's a good question. You should ask Tableau. But I kind of, you know, was focused on growing the skill set, I guess, and um, still love Tableau. Still do a lot with Tableau, but trying to grow. That's a good question. Thank you. Can unlicensed user really reset their password and log in? Yeah, it's possible. It's happened before, especially if you're using local authentication and it's external facing and they potentially put in their personal email. It's happened before. It's a pretty scary site because, well, number one, it's a good question. It seems like it wouldn't be feasible, but it is, provided if your admin team or you as an admin are not kind of monitoring your stuff. So the main problem with unlicensed is they still have subscriptions. Yes, they still have content out there. Exactly. And that's why yes, it's about unlicensed users, but it's about changing that owner. So if I leave and I still have a ton of content, just change the owner, and then your automation process that everyone should have in place that removes those users will just come in and clean them up. But I would definitely encourage you to go look. For those of you who do have external facing instances, go look at your Apache logs. Potentially, I mean, start now, but look historically, and you would be kind of shocked at potentially what's going on. A great question. So,
Michael, what about the subscriptions for unlicensed users?
Well, if you take off those subscriptions that they own, yeah, it's still the same process. Like you just change if they set up a subscription, I'm 99.9% sure that if they don't own content, in this case, a workbook, a data source, or a project, they'll still be removed. Subscriptions are, if they set up the schedule, it's just a schedule. There's no owner to it. Is that what you're getting at, Mark?
I'm thinking, I agree with you, remove change owners, but I'm thinking that if I'm an interrupter, someone set me up as part of the subscription. I don't own the subscription, but I receive the subscriptions. Now I become unlicensed. Do I still get a subscription?
Oh, right. Yeah, that's where, no, you wouldn't. You shouldn't. That's where you need to remove those users. Because now, I don't think, maybe you can add any email to it. I'll have to double check on that. But if you remove the user with that like sort of daily cleanup process, hopefully everyone here has to remove those. Like if you've got an HR database and it has terms in it, you should remove those from pretty much all your platforms, right? Whether it's just Tableau or whatever, that would come in and you wouldn't be on that subscription at that point. So let me finish reading Ken's question. How could we construct a log of who set what permissions when we have a multiplicity? Site admins, editors, publishers, all, yeah. This is like probably an admin's worst nightmare, Ken. So what I've done, and let me share my screen again just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. So this guy right here is what you would use. You'd simultaneously want to do two things. Number one is, and I can kind of, Mark, I'll put the query for that next gen. If you've got Postgres, and everyone who has Tableau has Postgres, it's the same stuff. Just sort of do a daily snapshot of this. So your workbook would have, any number of permissions on it, potentially all of them. It would have individual users. It would have groups. So what that next-gen permissions table and set of tables do is it tells you everything that they do. So if I'm added as an individual and I have these 4 permissions, it will say Mike has view, summary data, filter, full data. It will list all of those. So your process would go through every day with it would append and snapshot those. And you can do, I have a workbook which does some fancy hey, this is different from this workbook, send this as an alert. Then the second part of it is, figuring out who added those users. That's where those historical tables come into play, and you should be snapshotting those or making your own database pretty much daily, right? So if I add someone to a group, that's logged there. If I remove someone from a group, that's also logged in those tables. So you kind of have to do both. And I'll put the next-gen query in here so everyone's got it and they can run it against their Postgres. But that would be my approach, Ken. Let me make sure I answer that one fully. Q&A. So it's really about policy too. Do you want to have that many site admins? If so, you should be monitoring, who watches the watchman, right? Make sure you're watching what they're doing. And I'll post that query with this deck when I give it to you, Mark. So the command line commands you're running in PowerShell, what kind of commands are those? Those are all PowerShell commands. And the good news is for our Linux folks here, it's written in PowerShell core. So you could just easily port that over to Linux. It uses the Tableau server REST API, which is very thorough. So it's just a matter of dropping the module on your boxes, and there you go. I will put those examples in the deck that I sent to Mark as well. When transferring a workbook to another user, and the workbook had embedded credentials, yeah, it's tricky. It's a great question, right? So for the audience, the question is hey, I changed the owner, but that one had embedded credentials. So you're of that owner that you changed, the old owner. Yeah, you would need to go update those. I think Tableau, I'm almost positive that you can update the workbook connection now with the REST API. So you'd have to do that as well. That'd be a different, but great question. That'd be
even that, I thought,
a different call.
Michael, I thought if when I change the owner, if I enter my data source username password, that would do. You don't have to republish the workbook.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, you can do it in the GUI where you go edit connection. And that gets challenging though if there's 15 different connections or an Excel file or something like that. But yeah, absolutely. And I'm checking now. If you haven't already, for some late reading. Yeah. So there's update data source connection, and
Correct.
then there's update workbook connection in the REST API where you would be able to do that.
Correct. Don't
Great
have to
question.
republish the workbook. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Kevin says you still need to use tab command. No. So in 10.5 and above, there's a method that says update workbook now. That's literally what it's called. And it will pretty much the same thing similar in that you need the site ID and the workbook ID, but it's basically going to hit refresh now in the GUI, and the REST API allows you to do that. So if you haven't already, look into 10.5. It's phenomenal, what that opens up, especially with pipelines and all that, because you can then sort of trigger extract as soon as the pipeline's done. So what happens to the user's custom views when they are removed? I think those are also removed because they would be removed with the user. Jump if I'm incorrect, anyone. I think those would be gone too. So since this is about automation, I was waiting for someone to ask this question. How do you choose who the new owner is for the workbook or data source? Good question. What my preference would be is that you guys have a policy in place. Either it's one of the admins like on the team that manages, or it's like a kind of a null island account, basically, someone where you just sit there and like until someone claims it, you can then change the owner again. But typically what I've done is it's just one of the admins on the team that becomes the new owner of the data source. Obviously, you would change that for your environment, but that seems to be, if you leave, then, everyone's got a problem. But yeah, I would go that route. Jeff says, posted a doc on server forum yesterday about how to update connection perfect using the REST API. Thank you, Jeff. It's perfect. If everyone goes to look at the forum and check that out.
Very nice.
But there's a ton of stuff you can do with the REST API, so feel free to jump in. It's really cool. That's it. I think I answered most of them.
All right. Thank you very much, Michael. For those who still have more questions, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A area. We will have dedicated time at the end of my presentation together with Mike to answer your questions. For those who are here to listen another Michael's 2018.1.2 new feature demo, unfortunately, he's stuck with production issue. I just got that news early this morning. So I had to struggle a little bit to decide either we should skip the presentation or I come up with something else. So I thought I'll share with everyone about Tableau server permission. This is what I put together for TC18 presentation, but I'll do it here. All right. I will log on to Tableau server as a user. First, of course, you have to go through the SSO. And then once you are logged on to the server, hey, I'm on the server. Do I have access to any dashboards as an interactor? Or if you're a publisher, connect through desktop, can I publish to this server where I can publish? Once you log on to the server, click a dashboard, what data set I can see. Or when you connect to the published data source on the server, which data set I'm able to see. This is a rule level security. So my rest of the presentation covers mainly the permission piece. When I think about Tableau server permission, two words came up. One is robust. Second, confusing. Tableau server has very comprehensive, very robust permissions, which Mike also mentioned some of those, but also it's very confusing for a lot of us, which is why I want to choose this topic again today. Let's start to look at server structure, not from the hardware perspective, but more from a user perspective. A server has multiple sites. If you don't use a site, at least use one of those sites. A site is shared nothing environment. Within each site, there are projects. Now from 10.5 onwards, you can have projects within the projects, the hierarchy. And then there are data sources, workbooks, views in projects. And also, on each site, there are users and groups. Tableau permissions happen at all levels, at site level, and at project level, at workbook level, data source level, view level, and also the special privileged users like owners or admins. I'm going to go through each of those. Start with at site level. That's a user's site rule. I know that from 2018.1, there is new site rule creator. That's where in next month. Hopefully we can schedule Michael back to talk about that. But pretty much the basic rules are the same. Admins, publishers, interactors, viewers, and licenses, and so on. A few important things about users side rule. Number one, it is site specific. And the side rule is more like ceiling as the maximum permission the user can have for the site. I know this is confusing. In the community posting, there are multiple questions around this as well. An interactor side rule can never publish even the user has project level publisher permissions. An interactor side rule cannot save or save as. Save as is web editing. Even the save or save as is allowed at the workbook level. From 10.5.1 onward, interactor side rule cannot manage the project permissions anymore. Even the user is given as a project leader permission. This is a feature I don't like, but that's the way it is. And the side rule actually does not define what this user can or cannot do at the specific project level or workbook level or data source level. So the energy I gave is more like a side rule is someone's legal working right in US. Like permission at a workbook level, at a project level, data source level is more like the job offer. Even I got a job offer from a company A, I should not be allowed to work in a company A unless I have legal rights to work in US. Next, I'm going to talk about the project level permissions. Who can view, publish, or manage this project? But mainly there are two things here more important than other permissions. One is the publisher, next one is project leader. And this is the confusing part as well, because we talk about side rule as publisher, right? Now there is project level also publisher. I wish that Tableau will call something else here, but it's publisher. But this project level publisher is very different from the side rule publisher. Basically here, the project level, it defines, can this user publish to this project or not? Even the user does not have a publisher side rule, you can still set this user has a project level publisher permission. And of course, the end result is this user cannot publish here, even you gave him publisher permission at the project level. A project leader can do a lot of things. It has superpower, can set permissions for all the content in the project, can change refresh schedule, can change workbook or data source owners, which Michael also talked a little bit during the QA, can lock the project permissions. All those project leader privileges are gone away if this user has interactor side rule. That's a new change since version 10.5.1. And of course can unlock or lock the project permissions. I'm going to talk about more, unlock or lock. It mainly depends on, if you are project leader, it mainly depends on what you want the publishers to do. Do you want them, the publishers, to be able to manage their own workbook permissions If it's yes, unlock it. If no, lock permissions. There are probably multiple use cases where you want to lock project permissions. Mainly, the use cases I see people do is either there are very sensitive data here in this project. You want to make sure everyone has followed the same permissions. You lock it. Or you want to simplify the permission process. So each publisher does not have to manage his or her workbook data sources permissions anymore. One feature that 10.5 introduced is that the project hierarchy. You can have sub-projects within the parent project. You can have as many levels of hierarchies you want. However, only the top level project permissions can be locked. I know there is feature ask in the community. Hopefully we can open this permission lock to the child level. But that's a feature request. Feel free to vote that. I do have the idea here to vote for lock the child level permissions. I'm going to skip very quick. How permissions are evaluated in the hierarchy. I want to show this chart because the online documentation Tableau has is wrong. I spent hours testing. I want to share with you which piece Tableau missed in the online documentation. I know it's a little bit hard to understand. They walk you through. A customer solution CS is a parent project. The CS select training is the child project. And then you have a CS select training / class is another third level child project. The O1 here means owner 1. The PL1 means project leader 1. That's on the CS. On the CS / training, there's owner 2 and of course project leader 2. Now, look at the CS / training folder. The project leader and ownership from the top level, from CS level, which is owner 1 and the PL1 are inherited to the CS / training as well. And of course, to all the level down. In the Tableau's online documentation, they did not mention the owner 1 inheritance. That's incorrect. Similarly, the owner 1 can still be ownership or project leader role for all of those levels inherited. Tell me if I'm wrong. This is based on my testing I found so far. Next, let's look at the permissions at the workbook level. There are 14 different attributes you can set a permission, and each of those you can have non, specified, unspecified, denied. There are many combinations. That's project level. Sorry, that's a workbook level. For example, downloads. There are 4 different downloads you can set, you can control at the workbook level. Do you allow them download a summary or image? Do you want image or PDF? That's one. Or do you allow them download the summary data? Or do you allow them download the full data, detailed data? Or do you allow them download the workbook? There are 4 different downloads you can control at the workbook level. The next set of permission, which I'm going to spend a little more time because this is very confusing for me and for many other audience as well, which is web edit, save, or save as. Tableau continues to enhance the web editing capabilities, which is great. It is important for us to understand what it does. How do we set permissions? Web edit, save, and save as, those three things work together and all at a workbook level. Let's talk about different scenarios. First of all, as a workbook owner or project leader, do you want the interactors to web edit your workbook at all? Okay, web edit is controlled at workbook level, not a project level. Do you want anyone to web edit your workbook at all? If no, set web edit as no. And then the save or save as flag doesn't matter anymore. That's it. That is use case one. Use case number two, you do want some users to web edit your workbook, but you don't want them to save back anywhere. So what is this use case? What I see people do is that the interactors are able to web edit. They can only take screenshots after web edit. They cannot save as anywhere. They cannot publish it back to the server. That's use case number two. And number three, you allow them to web edit, but also you allow them to save as, publish back to server, but use different name. Don't overwrite my existing workbook. So the setup will be web edit allowed, download, save as allowed, save not allowed, and specify will do. And number four scenario is you give a full control. You allow someone to web edit, and also you allow the person to save, override your workbook. Think about that. That is, setting is also available. No matter for save as or save, the user has to have a publisher set rule because it is a publishing activity back to the server. And also the user has to have a publishing permission in one of the projects. If the user has publisher permission and multiple projects, the user is able to select which project to save as. Next, I'm going to talk about save. Think about a save. What is a save? You allow someone to web edit your workbook. Now you allow their user to override your workbook. There is a lot of trust. Basically, save means you trust others to override your workbook. You may ask, who wants to do that? Well, there is a use case. If you use it in the right way, this can be very powerful and very efficient, but also can bite you if you don't know what it means, which is why I want to bring up to discuss. Again, what it means save? Save means not only you trust someone to override your workbook from web edit, but also from desktop. The user can override your workbook from a desktop as well. And think about, let's say Mike has workbook, and Mike gives me a save permission. What happens when I web edit the workbook and save back to the server? Who will be the owner for the workbook? Actually, now me, Mark, becomes the owner of the workbook, not Michael anymore. Then you may also wonder what happened with Michael's permission. Michael used to have a full control because he used to be the owner of the workbook. He used to be able to do a full control for the workbook. Now, what happened with his permission? Well, it depends on what permission I gave to Michael. Because I'm the new owner of the workbook, I can also give Mike the save permission, or I even don't want like to see this workbook anymore. That's all possible. Think about that. Think about that. The good news is that if you turn on the revision history, I should strongly recommend everyone should turn on. At least there is auditing trail in the revision history. You can tell who overwrites last time. I will talk about the save button does not appear for some users. Why? Again, the summary. Save does maximize your team's collaboration if you use it right away. So we talked about permissions at project level, at the workbook level. We also talked about side rule. How those things work together. I'm going to use web edit, save, and save as to walk you through how those permissions work together. If you are able to follow this, it means you understood the permissions well. I'll try my best to explain. First, does the user have web edit permission? If no, the edit button on the server will not appear. If yes, the edit button on server will appear. Next is, does user have a publisher side rule? If no, basically, even you give this user save as, this user will not be able to publish back because he's not a publisher. He does not have a publisher side rule. So what he can do, he can web edit and take a screenshot. That's one use case. Let's say this user has web edit, has publisher side rule. Do you think this user can save as? May not, actually. Depends on if this user has permission to publish to any of the projects. If this user has no permission to publish to any projects, he will not get save as appeared. The save as will not appear for him. If this user has one project at least to publish to, then the save will show up there. This user will be able to save after web edit. At least side rule at least has one project with publisher permission at the project level. Then the save as will appear. All right, next talk about save. Let's say I gave a save as well, other than save as. User has a save permission. Of course, I still see the save as. Then you may not see the save. That's the one question I got from time to time, either from community or from my users. I cannot see the save, even I have a save permission for the workbook. What happened? Well, what happened is because you are not the owner of the workbook. Only if you are the owner of the workbook and the save will appear for you. That doesn't make sense, right? It does not make sense. However, this is how it works. If you're not the owner of the workbook, it's a two-step process for you to save a workbook. I think this is awesome design to make sure you don't make a mistake. It's a two-step process. Step one, you click Save As, and you type the same name of the workbook. After you have done this, as long as the workbook name is exactly same as what it is on the server, then pop-up will show confirm overwrite or not, yes or no. Once you click yes, confirm, then the save button will appear. This is how it works. I'm trying my best to combine the project side rule with project publisher permission with save, save as, and web edit. Probably you'll have some questions in this space. I'll come back later. All right, so far we talked about permissions at project level and workbook level. Now what about data source level? Let me ask you a question. When you grant workbook permissions, does Tableau server automatically grant the permissions to the data sources that it connects to? Again, when you give workbook permissions to a group, does Tableau server automatically grant the same permission to this group, to the data sources that the workbook connects to? Think about it. Is it yes or no? The answer is depends. The answer is yes if the workbook has embedded the password. It'll be no if the workbook has a prompt user. Think about what it means. To simplify the permission setting, I strongly recommend when you publish workbooks, select embedded password. So you do not have to set data source level permissions anymore. Again, summarize the permissions for data source. Few steps. One, only give publisher group that connect permission at data source level. What it means? Let's say three of us, we are working together as a team. We publish the workbooks based on a bunch of shared data sources. Only three of us, we will have connected permission to the data source level. So each of us, we can see those data sources. We can leverage, we can produce nice visualizations for the end consumers. That is step one. Step two, do nothing for the end consumers or interactors at data source level. Do nothing. I know this is too simple. Don't give them any permissions. Don't do anything. That's it. Number three, when publish workbooks, select embedded password option. That's all you will have to do. And of course, test out to confirm. This is a recommended option for data source permission setting. Well, if you don't want to follow those, if you want to choose the prompt user option when publish workbook using the published data sources, you will have to set permissions not only at the workbook level, but also at the published data source level. All right. Then what it means, let's talk about the data source level again for the connect permission. What connect permission means at the data source level? It means allow accessing data sources from either web, doing web editing, or from desktop, both places. Think about if you have a rule level security, which I don't plan to talk today, and the rule level security is controlled at data source filter or at the workbook level. If you gave the interactors the connect permission to your data source, that means that user is able to edit your data source and change the data source permission, which will bypass the potential rule level securities you have, which is why it's a vulnerability to give connect permissions to any other users other than a small subset of publishers who you are really working together as a team. Which is why, another reason why when you publish workbooks using option A to embed your password. That's the more safer way. Then you may have a question, what about the view permission? I know it is available there. The view permission actually does not allow a user to connect to data sources. The view permission only allows users to be able to see the name of the data source and the owner of the data source. So you can contact the person and say, hey, can I have permission to these data sources? That's all. That's a view. You actually cannot view the data. This is where the confusing part as well. You cannot view the data. You can only view the name and owners of the published data sources. I will not recommend a lot of people use the prompt user, so I'm going to skip that piece and recap it. For the data source permission options. Option A is at the workbook level, you embed the password. At data source level, you give connect permissions only to publishers, not to the interactors. This is a much simpler, safer approach for the permissions on the data sources, the published data sources. It's okay if you go with option B, which is from the user at the workbook level. Then you will have to give not only a few publisher connect permissions at the data source level, but also you have to give all the interactors that connect permissions. And the thing about the connect permissions for interactors, if any of them happen to have a desktop, they can download the data, they can do a lot more massaging of the data, and may potentially bypass the rule level security if you have in the data source. All right. View level. This is where Michael mentioned the permission is managed independently. That's where managed by view level permission. I know some users do use the view level permissions, but based on what I have seen so far, I will actually not recommend people to manage permissions at the rule level, at the view level, unless you are really, really very experienced users. Otherwise, you may very quickly get into situations that you don't understand by yourself. So I'm going to skip that. I'm going to, as a best practice recommendation, I will not recommend it at the view level permission setting. So how permissions work together at a higher level? Give you a summary. At a site level, if you can think as a Jew, does a Jew have legal right to publish anything to this site at all? If yes, Jew has to have a site level publisher site rule. And that's what site publisher site rule does. Then at the project level, so if Jew has a site rule as a publisher at the project level, which project Jew is allowed to publish? That's controlled at the permission setting at the project level. From publishing perspective. Then once Jew has a publisher site rule and a publisher permission at a specific project, can Jew set a permission for his workbook? That's where the log and log is about. Then workbook level, data source level has a lot of controls and permissions. So basically how Jew can set permissions for his content. Or what Jew privilege has for other content over there on the server. That's workbook level. All right, we pretty much covered everything, different level of permissions. We have not talked about the user side. Let's just talk quickly users versus groups users and groups. This is the last more complex scenario I'm going to walk you through. Hope you can follow me. This is talking about user permission versus group permission. Of course, recommendation is use groups, don't use user, unless you really have to. But what if you have a mixed user and a group? So how the user group works together? Which one overrides the others? This is what I'm going to walk you through. High-level user permissions overrides project permissions. But there's more details. First, does this user specifically denied it? If yes, then this user is denied it, sure. Second, does this user is specifically allowed it? If yes, this user has permissions, no matter how the group level is setting. This is how it works. Second, let's say this user is not denied it, not allowed it. Basically, this user there's no user level permission. Now let's look for project level. Looking for group level. Next is group level. Is a member of the group denied it? If yes, then this user is denied it for sure, no matter how other groups permissions may give the same user, right? One user can be in multiple groups, and the permissions for those different groups can be conflicting. So this is how the permissions are evaluated among those groups. First, if any group is denied, this member is denied. If anyone is allowed, any group is allowed, this user is allowed. And of course, if none is none. This is the logical how Tableau evaluates users and groups. All right, I now walk through this. I'm done with users permissions with summary of key takeaways. Number one, permission groups, not users, to simplify the things. Number two, you lock the project level permissions if you can to simplify the process for the permission. Also, may be very useful for very sensitive data. Number three, for unlocked or owner-managed projects, permission the workbooks level. I will not recommend at the view level unless you really know what you are doing. Don't forget assign the project leaders. I know that only server admins can assign project leaders for the top parent project, and then of course the top parent projects can assign the project leaders in the hierarchy in the lower level projects. Okay, the project leaders have powerful, super power, do many things. A lot more self-service can be done with the project leaders, so they don't have to come to server admins. We can save a lot of our time enabling those project leaders to do their own self-service. Leverage the project leaders. And of course, plan your permissions out together with a few publishers in your team to make sure the consistency of the permissions, same audience should get the same data set access, same similar permissions, so you don't create conflicting things, cause confusions. Use published data sources if you can. When you do so, in the workbook level, embedded passport to simplify your permission process. And of course, apply additional rule level securities if you want. And finally, test out. Test permission out. That's all I have. We still have 15 minutes to go. I think right now is the Q&A time. I'll go through the Q&A to see what questions you have. Mike, I know some of those questions are for both of us. Let's jump in and try to answer those questions together.
Yeah, so if you can read them, my Zoom crashed, so I
Yeah, of
rejoined.
course. The question from Tiffany. If a user is listed as a site admin or site owner, I don't know site owner, but site admin, can you or other project leaders still restrict their permissions at a project level? I don't think so. No.
Yeah, site admin.
Absolutely no. They are admins. And admins is admins. They have a special privilege. No, unfortunately, no. You cannot restrict admins at a site level, at the project level. No. Okay. Another question, any tools like strategies of migrating workbooks from, are there any tools for migrating workbooks from one Tableau server to another that update the password as well as the target system? We're using EDT power tool, but very buggy. Mike, do you know this?
Yeah, there's a question, I think the same question in chat. Yeah, the Interworks Power Tools, I think some people here are pro and con with it, but it's essentially how do you move content from either one site to another site or one server to another server. And I mean, there's a couple different avenues you can do. It really is about knowing what's in your content. So what connections make up your workbook, what connections make up your data source. If you've got that managed, migrating stuff is really, really simple. And a lot of times what's the easiest approach is to just export a site. And I think I dropped a link in the chat. Hopefully you guys saw that. And then import it either into a new site or into a new server. But again, to Mark, to your point, it really does take some planning, especially with permissions, like you want the same structure. Once you have that down, it's really, really simple. Now the challenge becomes if these are massive sites, some companies, Mark, you were talking about it, backups take hours, and extracts are massive, especially with 10.5, they're just getting bigger. So you'll need to plan that. You carry over just the TWB and just the TDS and redo the extract on the new site to save yourself some space and time. So I guess I hate to say it depends, but it really does depend and take some planning. That's the important part.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. For the specific question, when it's a password, how do we deal with that? We are also looking for the same answer. We are able to figure out to migrate a workbook from one server to another server if there's no extracts. Either live connection, if it's a live connection, we are able to figure out a password thing. But with extracts, we have not been able to figure it out.
Yeah, so the kind of the modules and functions that I showed, there's an option, I don't know if you guys remember, but where it's get like TS content, there's an option to download without the extract or with the extract. So you can publish, you just have to redo the extract once you republish. So I'm sure most of you have seen extracts of just the size they are listed in the GUI are not the size they are on disk. So just be careful if you're migrating extracts as well. The best bet would probably do migrate and do what everyone's favorite trick is update the extract in the XML and redo it on server. You're just spending way too much time downloading huge stuff. Just download the metadata and move the metadata. That's the easiest way. Or if you're super fancy, just use the Postgres workgroup database. Migrate that. That's a talk for another time.
All right. Next question. When I open the projects, it is directing to the nested projects in 10.5, but I want it should direct to the workbook tab. How I can achieve this? I also saw this posting in the community as well multiple times. What I do is that I go to the site level. I I click the content, then the workbook, and then I set this as a default location, default, what's the name? What's it called?
Start page.
Yeah, for all users in the site. That's what I do. You will have to do it side by side.
There's also a way to do that. Are you guys familiar with just writing SQL update statements? You can do that with Postgres if you're an admin. Just update everyone's start page if you wanted to. I don't recommend it, but
from
you can do that.
Perspective. Yeah. All right, next question from Global. I think you have to allow connect to data source if you are going to allow web edit. I think this is true, even the password are embedded. I think this is correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I think so. Otherwise, yeah. I agree. Good point. Let me take a screenshot, make sure I capture this question. Don't forget this one. This is a good one. I cannot take a screenshot. All right, next question. When I open projects, it is again, this is the same question repeating. Yeah, we answered this already. Next one, can you please show it? Which one? Oh, to show the thing, to show the set as I don't know if I'm going to show my production. Michael, do you have a test instance you can show quickly? I don't know if I'm going to show production.
Yeah, let me pull it up. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah. I'm going to stop my share.
We're talking about the start page thing, right?
Yes, set a start page.
Hold on. 1 second. Wrong online site.
Any other questions? We still have about 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's just so I'm doing that too. I've posted in the chat. I think you guys hopefully saw it about that next gen permission table, which will give you like a snapshot of all of your content. So I would just take a look at it, and Mark, I'll send you the query, and if you want to put on that admin group.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, so let me share my screen real quick.
About to show that. Next question is Tableau app. Does anyone have lucky using Tableau app on the iPad? Yes, of course. I see many people do. My husband, he always getting certification errors. I don't know why. I don't know. Certification errors. Is that something has to do with a VPN or single sign-on? I don't know actually. But in my workplace, I do see a lot of users are using Tableau app on their iPad. Any other questions? For my hash, when you got this certification errors, I think you should log Tableau case. That should be able to help you out. Any other questions?
And I got that screen up, Mark. I think it's what you're talking about, where you just navigate to your workbook content and make this my start page, and then change start page. So you could do that for every user. I thought I remember.
No, not every user, every site.
Every site, yeah. So
every
that sits in, I forget which Postgres table, but if you've got like 1 billion sites, there's an easy way to just submit, kind of do an update table statement, and then change the start page. But I'll give that to you as well, Mark, so you can post it.
Thank you. Mahesh saying, yeah, he opened a case to Tableau about his iPad app and working with support for a month. They couldn't figure out. I'm sorry, I don't know any other. I don't know. The app does not work on your iPad. Interesting. I will, in this case, I'll recommend Mahesh, maybe you post your questions to the community, Tableau community, to see if others can offer their solutions, because they may have a similar issue before. Jeffrey has questions. I got a certificate. Oh, Jeffrey also has similar. Jeffrey got a similar certification errors on the iPad app, and found that correct company's certificate was not loaded onto my iPad. Once loaded, it worked. Again, this is from Mahesh. Jeffrey was saying that he found that his iPad did not load the correct company certificate. Once it did that, then everything is okay. Thank you for Jeffrey. All right. Another question. We are trying to implement Tableau dashboards embedded in SharePoint online and not be able to authenticate users and had to log in twice, once in the SharePoint online and once in Tableau. Any help in regards to this? Michael, I don't know if you have much experience about single sign-on thing.
Yeah, so that definitely is a single sign-on thing. And if you look, this happened to me when we were, there was a Salesforce thing. There's some tab admin setting, and I'll look it up after we're done here, that you have to make sure is set correctly. That will, I don't know if it's the clickjack protection or some other IDP kind of little window to prevent that. I'll find it and I'll give it to you, Mark. But it's a tab admin setting that you have to make sure is set for that. You don't have to do that dual login thing. But I'll find it and send it.
Okay, thank you. Another question, I guess, is on the workbook level, or maybe on the server. Is there any option to hide the sort option for a column? My user asked this today, and I said it's not possible. Do you have any other options for this? I'm not aware of this. Michael, do you know?
Yeah, so are you talking about when you're loading a dashboard and then you hover over something, that little
yeah, the
sort icon pops up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen people do some crazy hacks around that. I mean, you could just let them view it. Don't even let them filter. So if you just let them view, then they wouldn't see that. But obviously, that's very restricted permissions. But if the only thing that you can do is not filter, then you're not going to see that thing pop up. Just don't tell them to use their mouse. Just kidding.
All right. Any other questions? We are at the bottom of all the questions.
There's someone in chat saying, any recs on connecting to HR data? Is that just general HR data or a specific vendor? I think Sandeep had that question.
Yeah. Oh, Workday. Yes, Workday.
I'm assuming, yeah, Workday's got some APIs. Familiar with them. So if you can get access to their APIs, it's going to be a lot better than using a data connector, because that way you can do that integration with provisioning users, but also kind of removing those users if they term. But I know from experience that Workday does have a pretty decent API set. You can export in JSON or XML, but Cindy, just ping me and I can kind of walk you through that if needed. Sure.
Right.
I'll send you some.
Okay.
Awesome, Mark. I always love these webinars. They're so fun. Such good questions.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. It has been a while. We got to this more.
It's been almost a year. You got to invite me back.
I know, for you. Yeah. By the way, another speaker, Michael Perillo, he couldn't make it today. His presentation was talking about 2018.1 and 2 demo. We will schedule that in next month. Coming. Okay, there's one more question come. When we use web link data source or data dashboard, it doesn't work well. When we use web link data source, what web link data source?
Is that like a web data connector? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm not quite sure.
Maybe a little bit more. Yeah.
The web data connector, yeah.
It depends how you've set that up, really. Like the web data connectors are very cool, but I think what a lot of times people end up doing is they just either use that vendor's API and kind of export a CSV if it's reasonable enough, or make a kind of a data table or database with that content. Just because if you're loading it on server, those web data connectors have to also be permitted on server. So I would check kind of if the admin has done it. If you're the admin, just make sure they're there, or just use APIs and export as a CSV or a table. The data's big enough. Those can be tricky. You're absolutely right.
But my understanding is that the WDC, the result will be extract on the server. As long as you can refresh WDC, so from a workbook connect to the data source on the server, that shouldn't be an issue. There's nothing needs to be there. Nothing special needs to be done. As long as you can figure out your WDC, refresh of your WDC, that's where it needs some special setting to refresh it. Jeffrey came in and say, FYI, iPad certificate issue. Try checking the certificate chain. Oh, certificate chaining. Gives the KB document. I'll try to copy the KB document. I'll try to post somewhere later. Okay. But this kind of QA thing will go away later. Thank you, Jeffrey, for your offer. Gives a bunch of links. Okay, got it. Thank you. Time is up. I think we have a couple more questions. Go through very quickly. Stan has a question. I would like to hear more about Tableau integrating with Workday related topic too. Okay, we can try to find the speakers for that area. Tableau integration with Workday. Got it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can do that. That's just tricky because Workday is obviously PII stuff. So we can do it in theory. But yeah, it's totally doable. So reach out. I can kind of give you hints on some of the sample code to pull data out of their API.
Okay, thank you. There's another question. Okay, thanks. We use some sites, www.somewebsite.com. So we stop use UH. I don't know what that means. Sorry, I really don't know. So web data source are recommended or not? Why not? And the WDC is a good data source to get data from a web, from other places where Tableau does not have connectors available. It's a good place to go. Just watch out the performance and so on. Any other comments, Mike, you have? We're running out of time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it's just about like performance and whether or not your environment allows it security-wise. But some environments have kind of engineers and devs that would just pull it from an API and load it for you.
All right, we queued other questions. Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you everyone for your attending today's webinar. This recording will be available in the Tableau community, in the server forum. Thank you, Ananya, for your awesome behind the scenes hosting.
Onboard people.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for hosting this.
Talk to you more later.
Thanks, everyone.
Hopefully. All right, bye. Have a great weekend, everyone. Go watch soccer.
Bye.
Exactly.